Good afternoon, my friends. This is the Grimflayer, and I hope you're all doing really well today. Playing some more competitively Golgari Midrange for your viewing pleasure, for your edification and your entertainment. Very quickly before we begin, let us welcome our brand new patron, Benjamin McElhaney. Hope I pronounced your name correctly, my friend, and Benjamin is an Inquisitor, so thank you so much for supporting the content. With Benjamin on board, we come to a nice, even count of 20. 20 patrons supporting the channel directly. Absolutely love it. Thank you all so much to all of you. Really makes this this frequency and this quality of content possible. So thank you guys so much, and welcome aboard, Benjamin. Also, to my patrons, I'm going to make a post later tonight, but you can let me know however, you can even leave a comment here on this video. Let me know if you're in the Confidant tier or above what your vote is for this upcoming month's scouting report. We've got some interesting decks climbing up the meta share that we haven't covered yet. Dredge, Tron, Burn, these are all more straightforward, perhaps, in terms of strategies against them, but still might be worth covering. And then, other decks like Ad Nauseam is even up there, according to Goldfish anyway. So, anyway, let me know what you think about that, and without further ado, let's play some Magic. Let's play some Rock. So, we're on the draw, and our hand is fine. We've got turn 1 Thoughtseize, turn 2 Bob, and then a lot of potentially decent stuff filling in the gaps there, with the Tireless Tracker hopefully carrying us into the late game. Opponent cycles a Street Wraith, and then they shock into Steam Vents. Okay. This looks like Shadow, and honestly, that's a lot better than... we're not going to have the game log for this one. Okay. A lot better than the some of the other Street Wraith decks for us. Specifically, always glad it's not Living End when they start off with the turn 1 Street Wraith. Anyway, Thoughtseize is our draw. They're going to cycle a Wraith in response, which is interesting. And we see a very interesting hand, a 1-lander. A 1-lander, the 1-land's already on the field, and they don't currently have black mana. So, do we just take a Serum Visions? That's the first question we need to ask ourselves, and I think that is perfectly reasonable. However, they do have a lot. I mean, if they only had 1 Serum Visions, I think that would be the snap take. But no matter what next turn, they're going to definitely be able to cast the other Serum Visions, even if we take 1. They're going to get a look at 3 cards. I just don't think it's realistic to keep them off of black mana entirely. They've already seen a lot of cards. They've already scryed a lot of non-lands to the bottom. So... for that reason, even though it's super interesting to take a Serum Visions and still wouldn't be that bad, I don't think it's necessarily what we should do. So what else? They've got Dismember and Fatal Push and Inquisition, so it's going to be tough to stop them from interacting with our creatures one way or the other. And therefore, at the end of the day, I just decided to take away the Gurmag Angler, which is a card that our hand currently cannot beat. Now, granted, we could Thoughtseize it next turn, but that's probably not the most mana-efficient play, so we'll just see what they do. Taking the Angler is really never a bad call. Like, it's just removing any threat, any of their real threats against Shadow any way you can, usually is correct in my opinion, all else being equal. So, sure enough, they found a land. Glad we didn't, glad we didn't go all in on them just never finding a black land, because that was just not realistic. So they Inquisition us and take away Bob. Fair enough. So Verdant Catacombs is the draw. We're going to grab a Nile Spellbomb, and I just chose to go ahead and clear their graveyard out right away. Again, we're still soft to an Angler. We could Thoughtseize their hand, but we can't Thoughtseize the top of the deck, right? So I think just keeping our velocity up, clearing out the graveyard, totally fine. And Collective Brutality is a pretty decent card in this situation, because we know they have a handful of instants and sorceries. The removal will still be in their hand at the end of the turn, so we're going to have a target for that Brutality, if we want one. Blooming Marsh is our draw. That's actually a pretty good draw in context of this Tireless Tracker, so we're certainly going to start ripping their hand up this turn. We see Snapcaster Mage, Thought Scour in addition to the 2 pieces of removal we already knew about. So we've got an eye to the long game. Snapcaster is the take there, number 1, because it's just the 2 for 1. Number 2, because Collective Brutality cannot hit it. So we will follow up with the Brutality. In here, you know, it's kind of interesting call, but in the end I chose to just take the Dismember, because there may be a world in which they crack this fetch on the end step, right? And then they might not have Revolt for Fatal Push, but they chose not to. Probably wise on their part. Thought Scour mills over Inquisition and Is It Charm. Is It Charm is definitely not the most common in these Grixis Shadow decks, so definitely not bad to know about that one. They run out of fetch land, and they pass. Alright, we draw Dark Confidant, that's not bad. But Tireless Tracker is the play here. And we'll pass, of course. You definitely don't want to jump the gun there and like fetch in response to their fetch, because then they can fetch again. We've got to wait for them to spend the actual spell, the Fatal Push itself, before we fetch, thus guaranteeing our second clue. So definitely a great piece of value for us. They're flooding a bit too. They've got 1 unknown in hand. I believe they played that Thought Scour. So Dark Confidant is a nice follow-up in this particular situation. We're very content to just pass holding up Clue, Decay, Push. Opponent's got a Gurmag Angler. Yep, that's pretty good. That's kind of the one thing we can't really beat cleanly right now, but we've got all the card draw coming our way. Looks like we're going to untap with a Bob. Liliana of the Veil can beat a Gurmag Angler. And, nice. So Bob flips an Inquisition. We draw a Field of Ruin for turn. Nice. Okay, perfect. We wanted to just check their hand first. I think that was correct, but the fact that they were slow rolling a Shadow, I believe they know about this Abrupt Decay, so makes total sense, but we just get to do everything this turn. We get to empty their hand, take care of 2 threats, and they just scoop it up. They're so far behind. We've got card advantage, we've got a Clue, we've got a Liliana and a Bob on the field, and their life total is low, which is only good when they have Shadows, which of course they know we can answer. So nice comprehensive Game 1 victory over Grixis Shadow. Yeah, our discard actually showed up pretty big there in certain spots, but really it's still the advantage engines that carry the game. It's still the Dark Confidants, the Tireless Trackers, the Planeswalkers. Those are your MVPs most of the time, and I believe that was borne out here. So I think in like just about every single league I've played in replay form since I started doing this, I have been against Shadow for at least one of the games. But I guess for those who don't know, we're going to quickly review the sideboarding protocols. Alright, my friends, cards I like against Grixis Shadow: Maelstrom Pulse, Lily the Last Hope, Kitchen Finks. Fulminator Mage is strong as well. Perhaps not as much of a slam dunk as the first 3 cards I named, but definitely a strong one. Engineered Explosives is good there too. And I like at least 1 Nile Spellbomb for sure, and the second one can be more in the tier 2 category. So with these 4 coming in, and no real particular interest in the rest of my sideboard, what don't we like? Well, I personally side out most, if not all, discards. So Thoughtseize is the one that might stay in. Collective Brutality plus the other 5 copies of discard can come out. So this is a grindy matchup. We want to cut a land as well, and it'll be a basic forest here. We then have more or less perfect liberty to bring in all 3 Fulminator Mages, which I do like to do. And then these last, like, I think any configuration of this 60 plus or minus these 2 cards is fine. It's very marginal stuff. But I think an Engineered Explosives is a little bit better than a Fatal Push overall, although there are obvious pros and cons to both. But I've never gotten my explosives, like, abraded. It's just, it seems like it's slightly better than Push. on the whole. And then, I don't know, this third Spellbomb could be a Thoughtseize, or we could take out the Thoughtseize and play all 3 Spellbombs. It's really, either way, totally fine. Lately I've been experimenting with the Thoughtseize in there, so let's go ahead and call it good there, but I'm not comfortable saying one is clearly better than the other, because I think, triple Spellbomb can be clunky in certain windows against a deck that's not all in on the graveyard. And, of course, that one Thoughtseize can be used fairly well. So I've been giving this a shot, but it hasn't really screamed better or worse to me. It's just kind of, it's just kind of marginal. And then maybe if you're on the play, you want to bring this forest back in because you're a little less likely to hit your land drops on curve on the play. You don't see that extra card. But anyway, your 60 should look like this, and let's go to Game 2. On the draw here, Game 2 against Shadow, and we have an unplayable 7, the one-lander. Not a keep. Our opponent likes their 7. We go down to 6. Yeah, this is a fine 6. It's got a curve. It's got some catch-up cards. We've got the Bob is obviously our main catch-up card. The Skoos can keep Snapcaster at bay, and maybe even keep Angler at bay. Maelstrom Pulse has 2-for-1 potential. This has got a lot to like. Fulminator Mage on the top. That I think we have to bottom. We do need a 3rd land here. Fulminator is not as effective on the draw sometimes anyway, so problem with all these catch-up cards with 2-for-1 potential is you kind of don't want them as much in your opening hand. Alright, it's not that you don't want them, it's that they're probably not going to stick around. Shadow is a very, very interactive deck, and sure enough, they go Blood Crypt, Thoughtseize, and they're just to kind of conceal information, basically. I ran out of an Infetched and played my Spellbomb rather than deploy the Blooming Marsh. Opponent draws off their Bauble, and they just play a land and pass. Fair enough. Ooh, okay, Liliana the Veil. That's a very, very nice draw, and I'm going to run the Skoos out into probable death one way or another, but again, they know it's there. Not too much to be gained, in my opinion, from playing around removal or what have you. Ooh, the Thoughtseize. See, that's what we didn't want them to have. We hoped that in some world, to take care of the Skoos, they would have had to use their mana this turn. It was unlikely, but that was our best bet. We just really wanted to force the Liliana through, but they have another discard spell, so down she goes. They play a land, they pass. And now we're flooding. Now we wished we left that Fulminator on the top because we've got no problem hitting our lands. We've got more than we need. So now's a good time to Nihil Spellbomb. We're looking for action, and the graveyard they have is big enough where they can easily play an Angler next turn. So, and lots of good Snapcaster targets go by the wayside that way too, but unfortunately we are just officially flooded. We've got nothing in hand except this Pulse and some more lands. Opponent makes a 4th land drop, and they're just passing too. I'm going to fetch an Overgrown Tomb on the end step, and the fact that they're at 14 life, who knows. That makes me think they probably have a threat, but no Stubborn Denial, and they know about the Maelstrom Pulse in our hand, so they're just kind of playing around that. Alright, Fulminator Mage is a fine draw, not because it's going to get them or anything, but just because it's something proactive to do that is going to get us value no matter what, basically. Opponent takes their draw and fetches, so they're going to Collective Brutality, escalating, pitching an extraneous land, so they're pretty flooded too. They're going to kill the Fulminator, they're going to look at our hand. Sure, we kill the Blood Crypt in response, and they take away our last piece of action. Down goes Maelstrom Pulse, but the opponent's got no board, they've only got 2 cards in hand, so we're officially in a top deck war, and we top deck a Tarmogoyf, which is totally fine. We still want to sandbag that land even though they know about it, for the usual reasons, Tireless Tracker foremost among them. And they pass. Liliana the Last Hope. Now that's a heck of a draw. That is a heck of a draw. Let's see if we can draw out any force a response here by attacking with our Tarmogoyf. They're going to shock in a Watery Grave, and they're going to Fatal Push the Goyf. Sure. Totally fine with me. I play out my fetch land here because two reasons. Number one, we're going to play it out this turn anyway. If our Liliana resolves, we're going to tick her down. And so we're going to buy back a 2-drop and just play it this turn to play around discard effects. Number two, this plays around the exact last 2 cards in their hand being double Stubborn Denial. We don't want her to get double stubbed. Even though it would be a 2-for-1, we still really want her to resolve. So that's a great pickup. Liliana rolls down. We mill over a Tireless Tracker, which is a fantastic card at this stage of the game, but again, for fear of discard, we just buy back the 2-drop. We just get the guaranteed value. So Tarmogoyf is going to come down. Opponent gets a Blood Crypt, and then it's over to them. They're going to draw, and they're going to pass. All right. Well, we draw a land, not very good, but Liliana ticks up. Tarmogoyf attacks. Ooh, the Snapcaster Mage. Snapcaster is a very, very nice draw here, and they get to Fatal Push the Goyf, and then perhaps more importantly, they get to pressure our Lily off the board. So, unlucky for us to draw a blank there. Also, potentially a bad play from me to have rolled the Lily up main phase. There was no real reason to do that, and if, like... So let's say we attack with a Tarmogoyf, but we haven't rolled up the Lily, then that puts them in an interesting situation. Do you take the hit for 5 and go down to 4, and then, you know, basically wait me out, force me to take up the Lily, then on my end step you snap push, and then you can pressure her off the field, hopefully. Again, they don't know that we have just a land in hand. Or do they say we can't afford to take the hit for 5, we've got a snap push during declared attackers, and then we get to kill the Snapcaster, keep our Lily around. So... would have been interesting to see what they did. I should have waited. I should have foreseen that possibility of Snapcaster Mage, and I should have waited. Then again, yeah, they've got a Collective Brutality, so they whiff here. But they still get to pressure our Lily off the field, so... not great. Okay, Fulminator Mage, you know, again, kind of similar situation. It's something proactive to do that we get guaranteed value out of, even if removal or a Planeswalker comes down. Here, I actually chose to take the trade. And here's why. So, basically, if they rip a threat off the top, I need to not only rip an answer, but rip an answer that lines up well with the threat, and it also needs to happen in such a way where they play the threat before they have discard to clear out my answer. You know, I could draw Push or Decay and they have an Angler. Stuff like that. They could have Stubborn Denial too. So for all these reasons, I think I want to keep the board as clear as possible to make my Lilianas of the Veil as good as possible. That's why I assigned the block here and just took the trade. They play a Steam Vents and they pass. So, the fact that they had another land in hand means that I'm happy I didn't just chump block in Stone Rain. Okay, Tireless Tracker. Heck of a draw. Heck of a draw. Opponent's got a response. They're going to Kolagin's command to buy back the Snapcaster and force us to discard our Blooming Marsh. Well, that is a heads-up play, and that's very, very good against what we were about to do. So, bit of a blowout. They play a land, and they pass, and we know it's coming here. They're going to fetch on our draw step, Snapcaster for Kolagin's command. Just so many 2-for-1s in this little sequence. The only silver lining is that we get to trophy in response. At least this was an instant in our hand, and not something like a land or a creature or a planeswalker, so... we'll go ahead and trophy that Snapcaster Mage, sure, but they very cleanly took care of one of our best top decks in that situation. So, feels bad. Alright, so they do nothing, we draw a land. They do nothing, we draw a Blooming Marsh again. Okay, here's the stage of the game where we are flooding and they are probably accumulating really good resources over there. Alright. We draw Liliana of the Veil, and now it's just almost a little too late, but I don't think there's any real choice but to try it. See how far she gets us. Well, we resolve her, we get to take her up, and we get a land out of their hand. Not the most exciting. And here it's still nice to sandbag the Blooming Marsh. It's not doing much for us to play it, right? So, okay, they start with the Serum Visions. That might not be the worst. They're cycling the Street Wraith. Oh boy. Okay. Fatal pushes our draw. Well, that's not very exciting. However, that was one of many reasons it was good to sandbag this Blooming Marsh, because now we get to just take up and keep a push in hand, which would have been good against like an end step Snapcaster Mage or something like that, but they don't have anything on the end step. It's back over to them, and they're passing with 4 cards in hand. I really don't know what they could have at this point, but we're on turn 15 of this super interesting game. We are continuing to flood like crazy to draw nothing good. We really want the proactive draws here, but it's just an overgrown tomb, so I guess we pitch that. They pitch a Teamer Battle Rage. Interesting to know that that's still in post side. They've got an Inquisition. Alright, there goes our push. And they pass to us. Oh boy, and we just flood yet again. Another land. Another land. Liliana takes up, gets a Stubborn Denial out of their hand. Again, that's a card that will not always be left in post side against us. They get to Lightning Bolt the Lily, stop her from ulting. Sure. You got it. Top of the deck shows us yet another fetch land. You've got to be kidding me. We play the fetch land, we took Liliana up. We're getting a lot of cards out of their hand. This is a great example of why a lot of these cards come out against us, though, you know? Situations like this, they're just pretty dead. Alright, they pass, we draw land. Guys, you couldn't make this up. You couldn't make it up. We get a Terminate out of their hand. Well, Lily's putting in a shift, huh? They're down to 1 card. And what is it? Oh, it's a Snapcaster Mage. Sure. Well, yep, they had to have something good and all that stuff, so Snap Bolt. Bolts the Lily. They will untap. They will pressure the Lily down to 1. And they will pass with 1 card in hand. And here on the end step, I'm just going to get the last fetchable land out of my deck. I just can't take drawing another land. Alright, we draw Kitchen Finks. Finally some action after all these turns, and wouldn't you know it, their last card is a Kolagan's Command, forcing us to ditch the Finks and finishing off our Liliana. Well, that is just a tilt if I've ever had one. We had all those turns of nothing but lands, and reactive cards like Fatal Push. Finally a situation where we could have used it and it just gets K-commanded. You know, if that was a Fatal Push there, it would have been totally fine. But our Kitchen Finks, which would have been a great draw there, gets K-commanded, and then they rip an Angler off the top. Alright, we draw Dark Confidant. That's honestly not that bad. It's a potential lifeline here for us, and opponent's sending it in with both. Yeah, I think we just have to take it. We have to hope our Bob can live and draw us into some gas here. Another Gerbag Angler. Well, come on, Maelstrom Pulse. Dark Confidant reveals a Treetop Village, and we have a Liliana, the last of the Veil, as our draw. Well, that's all fine and well. I guess it's not nothing, but these were not the greatest draws I've ever had. However, we're not dead. We can chump an Angler and then take it from there. And now we can't because they rip a Lily off the top. So during these crucial turns, we just flooded so hard. We drew reactive cards like Fatal Push. When we finally hit gas, it was just a little bit too late. They started hitting the old gas pedal earlier, and their draws were Snap, Kolagan's Command, Angler, Liliana of the Veil. Pretty hard to beat, after admittedly they had some pretty poor cards for the situation too. However, if we had if we had just attacked with Tarmogoyf before we ticked up our Liliana, the Last Hope, way back when, I don't remember what turn that was, but it's turn 22 now. So back in what was the early to mid stages of the game, who knows? Maybe our opponent just takes the hit anyway, and then end step they snap, they push, they kill our Last Hope. But who knows? Maybe if that had forced them, if that had compelled them to main phase the Snapcaster push, then we get to take up Kill the Snapcaster. It's a totally different game. So keep that one in mind for the future. I still don't know. They still might have just taken the hit. I'm sure they know how important it is to kill a card like Liliana the Last Hope. So they still probably would have taken that hit if I had to guess, but who knows? We've got to force our opponents to make the right plays, right? So definitely one to keep in mind for the future. And that was quite the game. That was quite the game. Disappointing to flood out when we were running the table with Liliana, but hey, what can you do? Move on to Game 3. Alright, my friends, Game 3 against Shadow on the play. And this hand is so light on action, but mulling is potentially worse because we could end up with another light on action hand, or we could end up with an unplayable 6 due to 0 or 1 lands, or even less action. We could have a 5-land, 1-spell hand. This hand is not great, but I think keeping it is better than mulling. Our opponent mulls to 6 as well, so that's pretty nice for us. We need a little help in this game, or we need our Bob to just stick around. Inquisition of Kozilek, Bob's not sticking around. He's not even hitting the table, so alright, fair enough. Nile Spellbomb, well, that's an alright draw. Certainly going to play it out here and have a somewhat, I'm somewhat interested in considering cracking it here on the end step, but the fact that they do absolutely nothing means I think I can sandbag that for one more turn at least. I'm not that disappointed to play Drago with Shadow in certain circumstances, and these circumstances I think qualify. So as much as I would love to, just get another draw and try to do something proactive here, the game's looking like it's going to go long, so saving the Nile Spellbomb for a more opportune moment when their graveyard's a little bit fuller, or ideally in response to a Snapcaster trigger would be ideal, right? So Dark Confidant, pretty good draw. Let's give him a shot. Again, they haven't done anything, so I'm not optimistic about his survival, and sure enough, he gets pushed. You got it. Okay, they make a land drop, and then they fetch again. So the fact that they're fetching again, the first time, they could have, the first time signaled that they might be interested in the Angler. The second time, to me, signals that they are definitely interested in the Angler. So I chose this time to crack my Spellbomb. Getting a Fatal Push and an Inquisition out of there is pretty fine as far as Snapcaster goes. And it means we're not dealing with an Angler this turn. And yep, they just take the Blood Crypt tapped, and they pass. Tireless Tracker, now that was the draw of dreams. That's what we wanted to see. Tracker into Treetop Village there was my choice, but Swamp there is totally viable as well to hold up Trophy and Clue. But either way, Collective Brutality. Well, I'm very, very punished for that. Right? Very, very punished for that, because they would not be able to Brutality this thing if I had a Clue there to crack in response. So it's not like, they probably have some other ways to kill it, I would assume, with that full hand, but maybe not. Maybe we just get max punished. They're pitching an Angler, though, so that's great for me, honestly. And they escalate once they take our pulse. Alright. You got it. You got it. Blooming Marsh, not a very exciting draw. Crack a Clue. Liliana the Last Hope, now that is an exciting draw. So now in this case, I'm actually happy, even though the sequencing last turn didn't pay off for me. It does this turn, because now we get to play an untapped land to play around a Stubborn Denial. So now we're sure our Liliana's going to resolve, unless they're playing like a Negate or something. And we get to roll her down, buy back the Tireless Tracker. That's the clear take, in my opinion, with another land in hand. Obviously, Bobs are reasonable too, but since we cannot play either this turn, I went for the Tracker. Opponent's doing some tapping. They've got some tapping to do. And finally, they realize they need to fetch. They're going to Thoughtseize. They take away Trophy instead of Tracker. Well, if it wasn't already clear they were going to play an Angler, it is now. So Gurmag Angler, totally clearing out the graveyard. Sure. You got it. They only have one card left in hand. They're representing Stubborn Denial, but they left us with a Tracker. So, I'll take it. Liliana of the Veil. Well, that is an absolutely perfect draw for this situation. So, definitely not mad about that one. And even though they know about the tracker, we're going to play her first. Again, this just plays around us, you know, a Stubborn Denial. So, where were we? Yep. Lowering the power here first with Liliana the Last Hope was crucial to that, right? Let me just, I'm pretty sure I'm correct about this. I'm just going to look it up real quick. I believe Ferocious is power 4 or greater. I just don't want to misspeak here. Stubborn Denial. Yes, Stubborn Denial says Ferocious. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, counter that spell instead of it being a Force Spike effect, right? So that's why we sequenced this way. So number 1, we tick up with the Last Hope to shrink the Angler to a 3/4. That means Ferocious is no longer online. Number 2, we play Liliana of the Veil first before Tireless Tracker to play around the Force Spike, the soft Stubborn Denial. So just wanted to make sure I had my facts straight, but that's why I did what I did. Like I said, pretty much the perfect draw for that situation. And of course we get to go Tracker into land. All is well with the world when you've got a board like this. Okay, they've got to Terminate, so they take care of Tracker, but these Planeswalkers are looking like a real issue for them. Nile Spellbomb is our draw. That's a fine one. I'm pretty happy to play it. Then tick the Veil up. Empties their hand out. Inquisition was their final card, so I'm happy to crack the Spellbomb here in search of action. And the fact that I drew a land off of Spellbomb makes me think it's correct to just cash in the Lily the Last Hope for the guaranteed value and proactivity of Tireless Tracker. Tracker into Field of Ruin here is awesome, and even beyond that, the fact that it's field specifically lets me make yet another clue and take them off of red. And it's a Stone Rain effect as well. They don't have any basics left to get. So, that you might think those lines were a bit aggressive, like using the Spellbomb right away is kind of bad for the longer game if they do a couple more things to stay in the game than they find a Snapcaster. Even cashing in the Lily the Last Hope right away is potentially a little bit aggressive, but look at the rewards we've reaped from it. They're off of red. We've got triple clue on the field. We got a tracker back. I think it was correct. They have a Serum Visions off the top, and then a Thought Scour, and then just a Polluted Delta. So they saw a lot of cards, but in the end it was not what they needed. And we draw Verdant Catacombs. Well, that's actually just fine. Lily ticks up to 3, Catacombs finds us a land. We're just going to leave the basics in our deck. We just shock in an Overgrown Tomb because we're still at a very healthy life total, and now the fun begins. We've got all the clues to crack. Treetop Village, okay. Maelstrom Pulse, alright, that's a decent safety valve for us at this stage. Scavenging Ooze, alright, something proactive to do. We could have attacked with Treetop Village there if we had another land or sorcery speed card in hand, but playing the Scooz there is totally fine. Hit you with our 6/5. Don't you just love this card? Don't you just love Tireless Tracker? Opponent takes their draw step and they just scoop. I don't think they could have anything that means they're not dead next turn. Truly don't. So anyway, that was a heck of a game 3. The Liliana of the Veil into Tireless Tracker turn, with Liliana the Last Hope ticking up beforehand on that Angler to ensure that we were not going to get punished by a Stubborn Denial either way. That was sweet. That was sweet. But, you know, lots going on this game. Lots of interesting decision points. Like, I think, you know what I think really paid off is holding on to that Nile Spellbomb until turn 4 or whatever it was. It is tempting to kind of get anxious and say, we're not really doing anything. We're just playing draw go. This isn't good. We've got to dig for action. I think in situations like that, as long as you're making your land drops, probably fine. Probably fine to just keep playing draw go and hold the Spellbomb for a more opportune moment. We put them off of an Angler, and it was to the point where they actually chose to pitch an Angler to a Collective Brutality. Remember that? So the fact that we kind of set their graveyard back far enough that they could only play one Angler instead of 2 Well, that was enough. That was enough for Spellbomb to be good. So, hanging on to that for the right time, I think was pretty sweet. And obviously, we had some pretty solid top decks as well here. And by the end, we were just in full flight, total control. Feels great. So, fun games. Death Shadow is kind of a fierce opponent in a lot of ways, but I continue to believe, like I've said before, we are favored, and I do like seeing them at skill testing. It's fun, it's interactive, and we usually come out the victor. This was no exception. We advanced to 1-0 in the league. See you for round 2. Okay, my friends, here we are playing round 2 of this competitive league. We're on the play, and our hand is fine. It's kind of mono 2-drops just about, but if we hit a third land for our Lily, we'll be in business. Better on the play than the draw with a hand like this, that is for sure. Opponent leads on an island. Island Serum Visions, okay, this could be a variety of decks. Another Scavenging Ooze is among the worst draws we could probably have. I'm just playing the Tarmogoyf here, just going for the higher upside, I guess, if we draw a land next turn for our Lily, which we really need to do. They go Serum Visions, Glacial Fortress pass, and we draw Assassin's Trophy. Well, this is miserable. We have such a great window against what looks like a control deck to resolve a Lily of the Veil on the play, with a Tarmogoyf already clocking, and we just can't draw a third land. Just can't draw a third land. And on top of that, we have not disrupted their hand at all, so all we can do is play a Scooz out. They make a land drop, they pass, and we draw an Inquisition. Well, you're late to the party, and you're not a land, so feels awful. But the opponent will Vendilion click in response. They're flashing in the Vendi, targeting us, and they see we don't have a third land, so they just leave our hand as it is. That's a pretty bad feeling. We see they have their fourth land. They have everything. They have Timely, Spell Snare, Snapcaster Mage, Path to Exile, D-Sphere. They've kind of got it all. So I just took the 2-for-1. I just took the Snapcaster, but either way, it's not great for us. I think we're supposed to just turn our dummies sideways. Whatever trades are I guess, fine with me. We'll eat a Serum Visions out of the yard. Gaining a life is not that great. They play a Field of Ruin, and we finally draw our third land, so we're going to try to, bait out a path here. Maybe, possibly, anything? Nope. Alright, so now if we finally get our third land, let's try the Liliana. And it's a Cryptic command. Wouldn't you know it? Of course they top deck the Cryptic, so we are just max punished. And then they play the Timely Reinforcements, and we draw a Tireless Tracker. Not the greatest. Let's try to chew through these tokens. They're finally going to path our Goyf. Sure. So Scavenging Ooze there is better than running out the Tracker with no follow-up, in my opinion. But they have a Spell Snare for the Scooz, as we know. Yeah, we're just trying to hopefully, top deck like a Dark Confidant there. Later on in the game. So we're just kind of eating through all of these things. But frankly, when we missed our land drop for so long, and then we got our Liliana Cryptic after we missed our window, yeah, I kind of just went on autopilot, kind of just checked out mentally a little bit. So they've got the Jace. They've got it all. They've got it all. Thoughtseize is our draw. Sure. Detention Sphere, Path to Exile, doesn't really matter. We'll take the D-Sphere. We just don't have, necessarily the best plays here to catch up unless we draw a land and our Tireless Tracker can resolve. They rip a Search for Azcanta off the top. Well, that's pretty bad. Okay, Field of Ruin. There's our land that we've been looking for. There's our field. And the opponent will decline to path us on the end step. They're just going to untap, see what their draw step yields. Now they will path, sure. We get a land. They're going to field our field. Yep, nothing really we can do about that. It's just kind of like we weren't not going to play the field, but this is a really good way for them to protect their Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. And then they have a Celestial Colonnade, so now we're doubly punished. We've got all of the tough lands for us to beat. Our clue yields us a Blooming Marsh. Unless there's another tracker to follow this up, which there's not. Well, okay. We'll throw the Tarmogoyf out there. They're going to Azcanta in response, and they find another Spell Snare. How disgusting is that? As if we weren't getting beat up badly enough, they find another spell snare, and we just can't take any more. We just scoop to that. So, oh man, I mean, this game was lost when we failed to find our third land. We kept a 2-lander that was very kind of bleh against a blue-white control hand, with the exception of Liliana of the Veil, absolute backbreaker, turn 3 on the play. Of course, we never hit our third land. The rest of our stuff was a little bit too mediocre to keep up with their pretty strong curve, to be honest. They curved out pretty well. And then by the end, they were just Escanteing into spell snares with 1 mana open, doing all kinds of absurd things like that. So we're just going to lose to these soldiers and these Celestial Colonnade next turn anyway. Not good, folks, not good. So we got wrecked by blue-white control. Perfectly reasonable keep. Perfectly reasonable keep. Didn't really do anything wrong. Just kind of didn't draw our third land, and didn't know what we were up against. The rest of our hand was never going to carry us through that match. So, tough breaks, but let's go to the sideboard, see what we do against blue-white control. Alright, my friends, blue-white control, another foe much like Shadow that we have faced many a time on this channel. Fulminator Mage is your friend here. Maelstrom Pulse is good. Lily the Last Hope is good. Nissa Vital Force is very good. If you can resolve her, she will probably win you the game. Collective Brutality is a solid card. And then you can consider a second Nile Spellbomb as well. Totally fine to keep Snapcaster Mages and Search for Escanta down. However, I'll show you why I think that's a little borderline as we bring cards out. So, what don't we like? Well, we can cut a land here. It should be Blooming Marsh. We leave our basics in. We can cut some underwhelming threats. We don't want to go too light on threats, but Scavenging Ooze and Kalitas are two of our more underwhelming threats, so out they come. All 4 Fatal Pushes can go, and that's a clean 7 for 7. Now you can bring in this final Spellbomb if you want. Abrupt Decay is the card that should come out for it. But if I see like a main deck Vendilion Click or Detention Sphere, I've actually been leaving in my Abrupt Decays, because the most important thing this card can do is kill a Search for Escanta before it transforms. But that's still probably too narrow to leave it in for that alone, especially because we have trophies and fields to hit the Escanta the Sunken Ruin, right? But we saw Vendilion Click and Detention Sphere both main deck. That made me want to play the Abrupt Decay for sure this game. So that's what my 60 looked like. Let's go to game 2. Alrighty, on the play this time, and the hand is strong. We need to hit lands, of course, but the hand is strong. We've got Thoughtseize into Thoughtseize Quagmire into hopefully Fulminator Mage if we hit a third land. That's a great start. We've got Assassin's Trophies for when the game goes long to take care of their top-decked Planeswalkers. The hand is good. We could use, obviously, now we just need lands. We just need lands. So, turn 1 Thoughtseize you. We see triple Flooded Strand and Island. Vendilion Click, Path to Exile, and Condemn. Well, right now we don't have any creatures that are good targets for removal. So, I just took the click. Opponent plays a Flooded Strand and passes. We draw another Thoughtseize. Okay, that's fine. That's a good draw, but it's not our third land. It is not our third land. They're going to fetch in response, and we see Teferi. We see Teferi in hand. Our creature situation still hasn't changed, so we sure enough take that Teferi away and pass. Oh, and we miss our third land yet again. Yet again we miss land number 3. Feels so bad, but in the interest of mana efficiency, I do think we play the Tarmogoyf even though we know they have removal for it, hoping against hope that they choose to just randomly Path to Exile it. They don't. Darn. Oh no, and now we draw Liliana of the Veil and we're still stuck on 2 lands. So, we're going to Thoughtseize. We see Condemn, Path to Exile, and they've drawn 2 Snapcaster Mages as the 2 cards we didn't know about. So, how could we possibly be any more punished than this? We couldn't. We really couldn't. Because if they had had things that weren't Snapcaster Mages, we could take away the Condemn, we could at least start clocking with the Goyf, maybe force the path, maybe next turn resolve the Lily. And if we had drawn our land on curve, we could have just gone Fulminator Mage them turn 3, Lily turn 4, would have been great. But we're just getting screwed. We're just getting land screwed this series. So I guess we take a Snapcaster Mage, and we're not going to walk into a Condemn. So I guess we just pass. But the tilt is real, my friends. The tilt is pretty real. We don't like playing against these Celestial Colonnade decks anyway, to begin with. And now, the fact that we just can't hit a third land to save our lives, it continues. Well, what are we going to do? So they island pass, and we draw a third Assassin's Trophy, and we just pass. And end step, wouldn't you know it, just like in Game 1. Just like in Game 1, where we finally got the third mana for our Lily, and the one card that they top-decked that we didn't know about was a Cryptic Command. Same exact thing happens here. They just top-deck the Cryptic, max punish us. That's enough. That's enough for me. I just scooped to that. There's absolutely 0% chance we come back from that. And that was just, we just rolled over and died. We just gave up a free win to blue-white control. Feels so bad. Feels so bad, and both of our keeps were correct. It's not like we had a really high-risk, high-reward, keep or anything. It's a perfectly feasible two-lander. We're 24-land deck. We're very, very likely to hit that third land drop before now. We're even very likely to hit it on curve. Between just natural odds plus, the odds of finding like a Dark Confidant and getting an extra card. Things like that. But and or the odds of the opponent feeling obligated to Path to Exile something, but none of those things went our way. We just couldn't really play this game. Feels awful. Yeah, not much more to be said about that. Just some atrocious luck here, and all we can do is move on to the next round. And here we are, my friends, round 3, trying to shake off the bad luck of last round, excuse me. And our opponent has mulliganed. They're on the play, they mull to 6. Our hand is pretty sparse, it's pretty weak. We really hope it's a deck where they play out to the board. If we're against like another blue-white control, we are just probably doomed in a different way, unless our top deck's great. But we've got to keep it, we don't know what we're against. The opponent likes their 6, and it's going to be Island into Aether Vial. Alright. Fatal Push. Well, these Fatal Pushes should be good against an Aether Vial deck, one hopes. And let's see what you're up to with our Inquisition. It is Merfolk. So Merfolk with 2 islands and a vial, so that's more or less all they need to operate a lot of the time. And they have a nice balanced hand. 2 different 2-mana lords and a Harbinger of the Tides. Harbinger of the Tides is actually a card that you do kind of want to prioritize taking away a lot of the time. It's a good tempo play. It resets the counters on Tracker, Skooz, Kalidas. It's good against Dark Confidant if, just kind of setting us back on his advantage while they presumably continue to pressure the board under certain circumstances. But here, since we don't have a creature for it to target anyway, I think it's better to take a Lord there. We're just trying to kind of take away the cards with the most raw power. And they drew an Oboro for a turn. Okay. I don't know why they would play that out instead of playing the island we knew about, but regardless, they go Oboro into Master, and they pass. We draw a land, which is not very good. Merfolk decks are starting to main deck Deprive and or Spell Pierce. The new card, Benthic Biomancer, is a card that plays well alongside those effects, because Benthic Biomancer, you can activate his adaptability at instant speed. So it allows them to kind of hold up counter magic, and then if they don't end up needing it, they can adapt the Bioman on the end step, right? So, cognizant of that, we choose to just main phase push a Merfolk. Totally fine with me. They tick up to 2. They play out a Mutavault. Alright, that card's good against us. We do have a Field of Ruin. And we do have Inquisition. So Inquisition was a bad draw here because we know what's in their hand. They can vial in the Harby in response, and then our Inquisition whiffs. So, Aether Vial, vials in the Harbinger. We could have, again, playing around counter magic, we could have fielded the Mutavault and then pushed the Harbinger. That's pretty reasonable, but I kind of opted against that. Let them move to attacks here, see what happens, and yep, they're going to fire up the Vault. Sure. So, clearly want to field there, get a Swamp, And, here again, I wasn't quite sure what was best, whether to push, whether to not. But in the end, I said, yeah, sure, why not? Let's just keep this board nice and clear. And we draw Dark Confidant. All right. That's a pretty good draw. Pretty good draw. Play out a land and pass. We get to untap with the Bob. Looks like. Yep, we get to untap with the Bob. So they've got 2 unknowns in hand. Violon 2, 4 mana open. Bob flips a Tarmogoyf and we find a land for turn. Well, none of this stuff is all that exciting, actually. But with Assassin's Trophy as backup, I'm pretty content to attack with the Bob and see what they do, try to kind of draw something out. They don't. Alright, fair enough. So, we'll play out the Goyf, and we'll pass. I'm still not that thrilled about casting an Inquisition quite yet. They're going to vial in a Lord of Atlantis. Sure. They take their draw step, and they're just going to pass, so we get to untap with Bob yet again. He's flipping us a land, and Liliana of the Veil. Okay, Liliana's reasonable here. And now I want to clear the way for her with an Inquisition. I want to get everything out. We can still have a double spell turn after this. They just let the Inquisition resolve, and we just get to take away Master of the Pearl Trident, which is pretty good. They could, of course, have vialed that in response, so I'm not quite sure why they didn't. However, we get to have the absolute perfect value play. We could Liliana, Edict the Lord away, and then maybe even trophy away the Vial. Trophying away the Vial is, it makes our Liliana line up really well against them, and then we're just burying them in advantage. The risk of that would be if they top decked like a Master of Waves, that could potentially let them rebuild, and we wouldn't necessarily have an out to it. However, either way, we just get them. We just get them good here. Liliana, the Veil's going to edict them away. They're so far behind. That is game. So, nice solid Game 1 win against Merfolk. We had some good early interaction with the Field of Ruin, a couple pushes, and Inquisition, but we lacked a board presence and we lacked card advantage. But finding that Dark Confidant, while they kind of had They didn't really have all that much going on. They didn't have any of their 2-for-1 cards. No Silvergill Adept, no Spreading Seas. So after the Multi 6, they just kind of were pretty anemic, right? But anyway, we got there. The Bob let us snowball, and let's go to the sideboard. All right, my friends, to catch a fish. How do we do this? Well, Lily the Last Hope is magnificent. Maelstrom Pulse is very good. Collective Brutality is a solid kill spell with other minor upsides. It's mostly just a kill spell here, but still good. Engineered Explosives is an absolute house against Merfolk. Really, really good. And Languish is a very strong card as well. So we've got 5 absolute bombs. They're all incredible cards. We don't necessarily have anything else we're all that interested in. Kitchen Finks is maybe worth considering, but number 1... if they're in a commanding board position, the type of position where Finks would be good, they probably have Island Walk, so it's not a good blocker anyway. Number 2, the double green can actually be a little bit rough against Spreading Seas, so I usually don't bring in the Kitchen Finks, and I don't recommend bringing in the Finks, but of course that will depend on exactly what you have access to. But what don't we like? So Nile Spellbomb doesn't do anything. Liliana the Veil's solid enough against Merfolk, but 4 of them are, yeah, that's pretty clunky, especially on the draw. So I think we can pretty clearly get rid of 1 Lily and still be just fine. And then from there, I honestly like just taking away the Thoughtseizes. Discard is okay against Merfolk. It's not great, it's not terrible. Taking away Spreading Seas or Silvergill Adept, especially if you're on the draw, that's pretty good. However, they also can, get in top deck mode fairly quickly, or get close enough to top deck mode, they can flash things in and vial things in response to like a mid-game discard spell and you just whiff. That can be very, very bad. So, Thoughtseize is the painful one. They are a tribal aggro deck, they don't necessarily just clock you that fast, they play more of a tempo game, but at the end of the day, we still have to respect our life total. So, those 5 in, those 5 out. Honestly, I don't really see too much else that we dislike. This looks like a really fine configuration for being on the draw. Now, if you're on the play, maybe this Inquisition, you can cut another Inquisition. I don't hate that. Bring in the Kitchen Finks, that's pretty fine. Pretty fine if you ask me, but this is a pretty solid configuration. Play or draw, but this is what my 60 looked like. Let's go to game 2. Okay, we're on the draw here. Game 2 against Merfolk. Our opponent has mulliganed to 6. That's great news for us. They are kind of a critical mass deck in some ways, at least in terms of keeping up with an interactive deck like ours. Our hand is interesting. It is actually a totally fine hand in some ways, and we don't want to mulligan against Merfolk. We don't want to get outground. We don't want to lose the 2-for-1 battles. But this hand is super soft to Spreading Seas. And that's the big problem with it. But they have to keep any functional 6 here against us. They don't want to go any lower than that. So, with being on the draw, I think this is a fine keep, but it's a little bit risky. It's a little bit risky in specifically that sense. Benthic Biomancer, turn 1, sure. Well, Liliana the Last Hope, I mean, that's a fantastic card in the matchup, but we need lands, and we need not to get seized here. Alright, it's just a Lord of Atlantis. We can probably handle that. We get hit for 2. Fatal Push is our draw. So we could have pushed something, or we could Inquisition. I think Inquisition is the correct play here. It's very unfortunate that our second land is Field of Ruin. If we could have Inquisition into push, what a turn this would be. But instead, we see Master of the Pearl Trident, Vapor Snag, and Mutavault. Well, they're already almost out of gas. We take away the Pearl, and we hope to be able to draw a third land and stabilize. But for now, Field of Ruin and pass is the best that we can manage. And they're going to adapt the Benthic Biomancer after we decline to declare blockers. They're going to pitch an extra Mutavault. They're going to hit us for 5. Okay, Blooming Marsh. Blooming Marsh is a good draw here. So we're going to go ahead and pass. I think our plan here is probably to Field of Ruin the Mutavault and then to Fatal Push the Lord. But they do not fire up the Mutavault, which is interesting. It makes me wonder if they have counter magic, but I still think our best play is to try to take care of 2 threats in 1 turn. So we successfully field the Vault, then we're going to push the Lord. Yep, they've got to deprive. Okay, so we're a little bit punished for doing that, but, you know, I do think that was the right line to go for, regardless. And they play an Island, they play an Ether Vial. They have just 1 card left in hand, and it is a Vapor Snag. Ooh, Dark Confidant's a tough draw. We're in a tough spot here because they're clocking us well enough that we are under a lot of pressure. And we can't stabilize behind a creature due to that Vapor Snag. So I think our best bet here, you know, we would love to be in a position to just kind of hold up spells and then maneuver in a position where Liliana the Last Hope takes over the game. But here, I think we do have to just play her. We have to be mana efficient here. We're hoping for some good draws next turn. Like maybe, who knows? Who knows what we're hoping for? They have a Spreading Seas. It's pretty good, to be honest. And they just come across at us for 3, so I think that's the right attack from them. I think that's a well-done attack, and ugh, another Bob here. So bad. So bad. Well, all we can really do is try to play defense. Again, we have no choice but to lean on our spells here. Tapping low for a creature is going to do us more harm than good with that Vapor Snag around. So they come across, both coming at us for 3. They're just trying to end the game. Here's our trophy. And they're going to Vapor Snag in response to the trophy. So this is another use case of Vapor Snag. It's pretty good. It's pretty good, you know, plan B for the card. But I'm honestly pretty happy with that. This is just kind of allowing us to tempo them out of, or to not get tempoed out of the game. Yeah, again, we didn't have a better play. At least that Vapor Snag is out of their hand. There are some worlds in which we can now make a stand behind a creature. Blooming Marsh is our draw. Well, that is a little bit rough. If we had had an untapped land, we could maybe have gone Tarmogoyf into Assassin's Trophy, but instead, it's just Tracker into land, taking the Liliana up again. we are dead to another Vapor Snag. We're dead to a few things here. And one of them is this Lord that they vialed in. So everything island walks, and we can't do anything about that. So we got punished a bit by the clunkiness of our land base there. The fact that we could not... the fact that that Field of Ruin early on didn't let us have Inquisition and Fatal Push on turn 2, that was rough. If we had been able to do that, we would have stemmed the bleeding a lot earlier. Granted, we would still have had the Mutavault to deal with, right? So that's why Field of Ruin, even when it's bad, it's still pretty good. You know, cleanly answering their Mutavault without spending a spell to do it. Yeah, that's awesome against Merfolk. But here we were just a little bit too clunky, a little bit too loaded down with threats, especially threats that aren't that good in this matchup. Like Dark Confidant's not good here when you're a little bit stuck for lands and when you're on the defense. Tarmogoyf is not the best against Merfolk either, because it's just, you know, can get blown out by a Merfolk Trickster pretty hard. Either way, we were kind of locked out of casting creatures by that Vapor Snag regardless. So they just had a nice little tempo progression here, and we just couldn't handle it. So I guess there's going to be a game 3. Let's check that out. Alright, my friends, Game 3 on the play against Mono Blue Merfolk, and our hand is among the collection of the most powerful cards that we have in this matchup, but it is also Clunk City. We have no early interaction besides maybe just running out the EE onto, which of course is good, but not necessarily the ideal use case for it. However, this hand is a certain keep. There's no way we throw back a hand like this. And our opponent has mulliganed to 6 yet again, so it's worth noting they've mulled to 6 all 3 games. You know, definitely not great for them, definitely nice for us. We do well against fair decks. If the fair deck takes even 1 mulligan, it's pretty sweet for us. Overgrown Tomb? Alright, well, I guess I don't hate that. It lets us cast our Kalitas and Languish for sure. So yeah, we've got nothing better to do than just run out the EE. So if nothing else, this should prolong the game and allow us to really get to a stage where we're casting our Haymakers. They tap out for a Silvergill Adept, revealing another Silvergill Adept. Well, that's a good start. It really is in terms of playing around in Engineered Explosives. These are expendable cards that can pressure the board, and for that reason, I chose to run out the Liliana here and just tick her down. I don't want to lose anything out of my hand, really don't, so I'm pretty happy to just keep the board clear, even though it's a bit of a non-bow with my EE. Benthic Biomancer is a good play for them. Bioman into Spreading Seas. Alright, they've got a lot going on here. They've got a lot going on. That's pretty decent. Field of Ruin is our draw. Sure. So let's tick up. We do have to pitch that field because we need the access to the colors provided by this Overgrown Tomb. Even though it's more painful, that's definitely the correct pitch there. And it's just time. It's just time to slam the Kalitas. Kalitas is so good here. The fact that they're adapting main phase, not a great sign for them, a bit of a desperation move. And they find another island, pitching a Minamo School at Water's Edge. Then they're going to play out another Silvergill Adept, so we know about both of these cards. Actually, they showed us another Biomancer, excuse me, so I shouldn't have X'd out of that. Regardless, all they do is play out some stuff that's moderately expendable. They've already got value out of both of these, and they pass to us. Alright, Field of Ruin, that's a fine draw because it lets us just run out the tracker here. So, with that in mind, I definitely don't want to pitch this Languish. So, I'm pretty happy just cashing in the Liliana for an Adept, making a zombie. Coming out ahead on that trade, even though it's an expendable card that we got rid of. Kalitas cracks in for 3. That's a good start. Clocking, stabilizing our life total, all that good stuff. Tireless Tracker into Field of Ruin. Pass to you, holding up EE activation and Clue. So we are in an extremely strong position right now. The opponent taps out for a Master of Waves. Alright, you got it. And I don't imagine they'll have anything else here. And indeed, they just pass to us. So end step will crack our Clue. We find a Verdant Catacombs. Well, that is just awesome. Gotta love finding a fetch land off of the Tireless Tracker. With the Tireless Tracker out, excuse me. So we make 2 clues. We're going to crack 1 using that blue mana, putting that blue mana to work, and we're finding Tarmogoyfs. Okay, so it looks like we're just in a really commanding position here. We're just finding gas and all that stuff, but it's actually a little bit awkward because right now nothing on board survives a Languish. And that's a little bit bad. That's a little bit bad. So normally this would be a great place for Languish under other circumstances, but we couldn't quite get there. If we had found another land here, we maybe just, like, eat a zombie with the Kalitas and then Languish the board and be totally fine with that. But as it is, we can't quite do all that, so we're just going to crack another clue in search of something else to do, and it's a Maelstrom Pulse. So that's a little bit awkward. We don't want to attack into all these tokens necessarily like we could, but I'm fine just sitting back here. We hold up EE. Master of the Pearl Trident, Benthic Biomancer. Alright, so they're developing their board. They've still got 3 cards in hand. They might be representing Spell Pierce as well. These are all things to consider. So here, I was kind of tempted to just crack that EE, just trade it 1 for 1 just to use my mana, but I chose not to, and we draw Liliana the Last Hope. Alright, so that's actually a pretty reasonable draw here. We're going to run her out first to play around Spell Pierce. Indeed we do. We're going to tick up on the Master of Waves, reducing it to a 1/1, and then we will crack our EE, just trading it 1 for 1. Well, technically, we get rid of the Spreading Seas too. So that's kind of a 2 for 2, because they already draw off the seas, right? Regardless, we get to clear out just 1 creature with the EE, which is never really where you want to be, but in this situation it's amazing, because that Anthem effect goes away. The Master of Waves is a 0/0. The whole board of tokens gets wiped. We make 2 more zombies, and now we get to just send in the clowns. 3/4 Kalitas, 6/5 tracker, and a 2/2 zombie coming across the battlefield, hitting for 11. We're up at 23. We've got a couple zombies playing defense for a Lily the Last Hope. We've got a handful of absolute bombs, and let's see what the opponent's got. Tidebinder Mage to keep our tracker tapped. As long as this card, as long as they control this card, sure. And then a Lord of Atlantis. Alright. But they don't have Island Walk, so they can't really pressure Lily off the board, not that they have their luxury to do so anyway, down at 6. So we draw another piece of removal, which is going to be sufficient to just end this game. So we push the Lord. That lets us tick up to kill a Benthic Biomancer. Then we Maelstrom Pulse the Tidebinder Mage. Obviously, we could have pulsed the Biomen away too. Doesn't really matter, because no matter how we do it here, they are just deterministically dead on board, because we've got too many attackers for them to successfully block, and the game is over. So, pretty crushing victory here. Game 3. We are pretty happy to have hit the lands to curve out well, like the Lily on turn 3, the Kalitas on turn 4, then the Tireless Tracker going off after that. Definitely feels good. Definitely feels good. We were in a bit of an awkward spot with respect to our Languish. If they had had kind of a different progression, you know, things might have gone differently. But Languish was a great safety valve. If they had more stuff like Tidebinder Mage and you know, excuse me, not Tidebinder Mage, Harbinger of the Tides, ways to bounce our stuff back and then tried to kind of pressure us out of the game. Languish was a good break glass in case of emergency button, but we did not end up needing it. We just buried them with Planeswalkers and Kalitas and Tireless Tracker. Feels good. We invade the seas with an army of the dead. Pretty cool if you ask me. So good games, well played to the opponent, and we advance to 2-1 in the league. Hope you guys are enjoying this, and I will see you for round 4. Round 4, my friends. We've lost the die roll, and we've got an unkeepable 7. One lander is not going to cut it, especially with all these 3 drops. So our opponent likes their 7. We go down to 6, and this is a solid 6. Really is. Really is a solid 6. Blooming Marsh is tempting on the top, but you know, because that makes sure we can play Tireless Tracker on turn 4 with land to follow it up. But I chose to bottom it. We're likely enough to hit a 4th land by turn 4 anyway. I would rather look for more action. Opponent goes Dark Slit Shores and pass. Not the most common opening in Modern. It could be a couple different decks, but Inquisition's probably going to be good against any of them. We lead off on one, we drew another. We see it's Ad Nauseam. Ad Nauseam is a deck that combos off drawing their entire deck using the namesake card Ad Nauseam, which can be cast for value as just like a very expensive, in terms of life total and mana cost, repeated card draw spell. But when Ad Nauseam is combined with Angel's Grace, which you see here in hand, or Phyrexian on life, they can draw their entire deck, and then they can use Simian Spirit Guides and or mana that's already on the field that they have left over to cast a Lightning Storm, pitch a bunch of lands and kill you that way. Or they can cast Laboratory Maniac and cast then a card draw spell like Serum Visions, and they can win the game either of those two ways, plus potentially some alternate win cons from the side. But we see a hand that's very light on the mana rocks. They don't have any of the mana rocks like Pentad Prism and Lotus Bloom. So there is potentially some temptation to take the Simian Spirit Guide there, but at the end of the day, I do think Angel's Grace is the better take. They have a Serum Visions for turn, okay? And they pass. Playing the Plains before the Serum Visions is a little loose, in my opinion, because they could have drawn a Scryland off of the Serum Visions. They have Temples of Enlightenment and Temples of Deceit in the deck, which would have been a great turn 2 land drop for them. We find another Treetop Village, potentially not the best. Nothing to do here but fire off our other Inquisition, though, and we see indeed the Temple of Deceit there, so they're punished for their sequencing a bit. Hopefully we can take advantage of it, but them hitting their land drops is not good news for us, because they've got those Ad Nauseams in hand. Treetop Village is obviously the follow-up, and then we pass. They have a Pentad Prism, and that's pretty good for them. Now, from memory, they scryed top with the Serum Vision, so maybe that's actually, maybe they didn't want to quote-unquote waste this scry with the Temple of Deceit. Certainly that's why they didn't want to do it here on this turn. So I suppose that does make some sense. We draw another manland. Not the greatest. I think the clear play here is just to decay the Pentad Prism. You could make an argument for playing Tracker there because they're unlikely to have main deck removal for her, which is true. That starts our clock a turn earlier. The problem with that is then if they untap, they could, in theory, just kill us. So I think we should take away that Pentad Prism. It's a good value play regardless. And then next turn we do get the guaranteed tracker value, right? So Temple of Deceit, passing to us. Liliana the Last Hope, not a good card in the matchup at all. Does very, very little. It does very little for us. So our draws have been pretty poor, guys. It's not great to play your first creature on turn 4. You really want to clock early with a Bob or a Goyf here, but this is the best we could manage. And it looks like they've finally stopped hitting their land drops and still no mana rocks. So they're a little bit gated potentially by mana here. This gives us a window of opportunity. And further affirms the decision to kill the Pentad Prism last turn, because if they just drew another Angel's Grace, if they have another Angel's Grace in hand, they could have just untapped and killed us with access to 6 mana via that Pentad Prism. Collective Brutality, there's a draw I'm finally pumped up about, and Liliana the Last Hope does so little here that I'm actually interested in escalating just to drain them for 2, just to increase our clock by that little bit more. Life gain is not particularly relevant in all except the most extreme corner cases against Ad Nauseam, but I would rather drain them for 2, just have them lose 2 life basically, than play a Liliana the Last Hope. So, especially with all these mana sinks on board. So we see they do have Simian Spirit Guide, they do have double Ad Nauseam, still, as we knew. They also have a Mystical Teachings, so Mystical Teachings is something that on the end step here, if we leave the Teachings and we take an Ad Nauseam, what they can do is end step for an Angel's Grace, they untap, they draw a land, we're dead. An untapped land, that is, because they can Simian Spirit, they can cast the Grace off the plains, they can exile Simian, Ad Nauseam. That's game. As far as I can tell, that is the best take. The other thing is, like, on the end step here, if we leave Ad Nauseams in hand, though, we are leaving the door open for them to cast a value Ad Nauseam. They can end step, exile the Simian, cast a value Ad Nauseam, hope to hit a lot of lower costed things, and then take it from there. They still have another Ad Nauseam guaranteed in hand that way. So it's not an easy decision here, but I chose to take away the mystical teachings and then crack a clue here. If we find maybe like a Verdant Catacombs, we might have wanted to consider playing that, but now we'll just play out our third man land, hit them for 4. Finally starting our clock here. They're down to 14, and they chose not to go for the value Ad Nauseam on the end step, so I'm pretty happy about that, actually. They find a land, it's a Temple of Deceit, though, so it comes in tapped. And we know their whole hand, it's 2 Ad Nauseams and a Simian Spirit Guide. Forest is our draw for turn. Looks like a very bad draw, but I actually consider it a decent one here. Obviously, there are some better draws that we could have, but Forest lets us just fire up both treetop villages, and as much as it would be nice to sink some mana into this tracker, I think what we're supposed to do here is just hit them for 10. This basically takes the value Ad Nauseam totally off the table for them, unless they want to try to do it now, maybe? Even that doesn't make sense. Because they could find an... there's almost no way that, unless they have some main deck stuff that I'm not expecting, that it would make sense for them to do it now. So I think their window to do a value Ad Nauseam would have been at the end of my last turn. But now we've got them down to 4. They're basically hoping to top deck exactly Angel's Grace, or maybe Phyrexian on life just to prolong the game. But they haven't, so now they have to roll the dice on a main phased Ad Nauseam. They find a Plains, they find a Pact of Negation, and then Laboratory Maniac, their third find, kills them. So, I don't know what they were hoping for there. Maybe an Angel's Grace, so they could go Plains into Angel's Grace and stay alive for another turn, take it from there. But they died to their own Ad Nauseam, kind of a desperation move. And it is good to know here whether Ad Nauseam is just going, cast for value like this, or whether it goes off and they draw their whole deck and you're dead. You should still have them play it out here in the competitive leagues when there's money on the line, because it shows you information about their deck. Even only seeing 3 more cards, this was valuable info. A second Plains is not common to my knowledge in Ad Nauseam. At least it was not when I played it. You usually ran 1 island, 1 Plains, and pretty much called it good there. But maybe there's enough effects like Assassin's Trophy and Field of Ruin and all that in the meta, now that they cut the utility slot, which could be something like Dreadship Reef or Nephalia Academy, or just another temple, and they add a 3rd basic land. So regardless, that is very good to know. If we see a second Plains, we should expect 3 basic lands. I doubt they would play Plains number 2 over Island number 1, but maybe they would, who knows. Regardless, that's good intel to have, and more importantly, we won game 1. So feels good. Waiting all the way till turn 7 to get the kill. Technically would have been turn 8, I think, if we had... No, sorry, we were on the draw, so it's a turn 7 kill either way. But yeah, that's often a little bit too slow for Ad Nauseam. They don't usually kill you before turn 4, but they are very consistent at assembling that turn 4 kill. However, our disruption was not the greatest, was not at its best, but it proved to be just enough to get the job done. A couple Inquisitions and an Abrupt Decay and a Collective Brutality, and then just kind of beating in with trackers and treetops. It got us there. It was not the cleanest win, but a win nonetheless. So let's take a look at the sideboard, see what to do here. Alright, my friends, so at the time of this recording, MTG Goldfish has Ad Nauseam at actually the 10th place in the meta, so it's at a higher meta share than it has been for a while, and it's also worth noting that if this London Mulligan rule ends up sticking, that they're going to be testing out soon, Ad Nauseam is a deck that could stand to benefit from it, partially because they're a combo deck, and partially because they're a leyline deck, and partially because they're a deck that does not shuffle. most of the time, although this particular build had mystical teachings, so that's a bit of an exception. But many Ad Nauseam decks don't have any shuffle effects at all, so all of those reasons the London Mulligan rule could benefit them. So definitely a good deck to know how to kid out against. So what do we do against a deck like this? Well, Maelstrom Pulse. You guys notice a theme? I bring this card in so many matchups, it's insane. I don't know how people can play with fewer than 2. This card is awesome. Yet again, we want Maelstrom Pulse as one of the most important cards to bring in here. No question about that in my mind. This is a combo deck. Surgical Extraction on the namesake card Ad Nauseam is pretty much awesome. I know in the past, including when I played the deck Ad Nauseam, a lot of Ad Nauseam players were playing a more value-oriented Plan B. Like, I played a couple Grave Titans in my sideboard. People would play Dragon Lord Dromoka, things like this. All kinds of stuff. You could even do an Esper Unburial Rites Gifts Ungiven package with Iona and whatever other, unbeatable cards you want. But lately I haven't been seeing that. I haven't been seeing that in lists. Maybe it's because those were more than anything probably for BGX decks, and now that we have Trophy that stays in against them anyway, we can answer all that stuff. So they probably just stick to the plan, but it's still worth noting that Surgical Extraction is not necessarily lights out, because they could indeed have another way to kill you, even if you get rid of Ad Nauseams. Nevertheless, we want this card. Those two are pretty obvious. From there, it gets a little less obvious. Grafdigger's Cage, Nile Spellbomb, these cards don't really do anything unless, again, they're playing some kind of transformative sideboard plan. Deathmark, Lily the Last Hope, very bad. Collective Brutality and Engineered Explosives are both good enough to come in my opinion. Again, just the drain for 2 is okay, but mainly this is going to poach Angel's Grace Ad Nauseam. Even some cantrips or some sideboard cards. All good. Lots of good targets for Brutality. And for EE, so what we can do here is a few different things. We can clean up the Pentad Prisms on 2. That's not usually the most ideal use case, because, of course, we play a lot of important permanents at 2 as well. However, there are some windows where that's good. There are also some other windows where if they've got at least one Lotus Bloom ticking down, you can just cast your EE at 0, and then the upkeep where they resolve the Lotus Bloom, it's going to be cast on the upkeep. On that upkeep, before they take their draw, you can crack the EE, try to force them to use the Bloom suboptimally, or just not really have a good use for it at all. It's kind of corner case, but I think still bringing in the EE is better than some other options that we have access to. And what else do we like here? Well, none of this other stuff really does anything. As far as Languish and Finks goes, Nissa's pretty loose too. Buying back a permanent, not that exciting. Yeah, a haste attacker, it's technically a threat, it's technically a way to end the game, but not the greatest here. I'd rather see Fulminator Mages come in. They're not the first names on the team sheet either, because they can just produce a whole lot of artifact mana, but they might be better than other things we're doing, so let's take a look. These 4, however, are definites, and 4 Fatal Pushes coming out. That's your guaranteed 4 for 4. That's kind of the... those are the obvious clear changes. Now, is there anything else we don't like? Well, yeah. Liliana the Last Hope does very little. She's a little bit better post-side because they do play some board sweepers, so maybe, buying back a threat is fine, but she's still very, very poor. Kalida's Trader of Get and Scavenging Ooze, these are kind of cards that we can cut as far as, a lot of combo decks go. There are more anemic threats, and Ad Nauseam doesn't leverage these guys well at all. They're not using the graveyard at all. They're not playing creatures at all. Again, unless there's some spicy stuff coming out of the side. So I'm pretty happy to cut those 3 for 3 Fulminator Mages. That's pretty much where I'm at now. Actually, now that I'm looking over my 60, Nile Spellbomb does literally nothing, right? So we could actually bring back the Scavenging Ooze, or we could play the Nissa, and honestly, I think just the 2/2 Grizzly Bear might be a little bit better than Nissa Vital Force here. These last cards are not that great no matter how you slice it. However, we do have a lot of very, very good things to do and most of them are already main deck. So this is a good matchup for us, in my opinion, and this is what our 60 will look like when we go to Game 2. And here we are, my friends, for Game 2 on the draw against Ad Nauseam, and our opponent has kept 7. That's a little bit disappointing. We're expecting Leyline post-board. So what does that mean for our hand here? Well, turn 2 Tarmogoyf and turn 3 Liliana, those are two of the best turn 2 and turn 3 plays we have, frankly. Otherwise, our hand is not doing much. We don't have man lands. We don't have a ton of utility out of our lands. Field of Ruin is okay. Again, they play relatively few basics. We can maybe get them a little bit with that, but the big problem is we don't have Disruption outside of the Lily. No turn 1 discard, no Abrupt Decay, no Assassin's Trophy, no Maelstrom Pulse. Those are all cards we really want to see. So in my opinion, this is kind of a borderline keep, but on the draw, you know, we have ways to get there. It's a functional hand, and we could mull to a hand with lots of hand disruption and then just get blown out by a Leyline anyway. So in the end, I chose to keep it, but it's kind of a medium hand. It's kind of a medium hand. We might be a little helpless against a really good Ad Nauseam draw, but we'll have to see. So Leyline, as expected, is there, and, you know, if they've got a hand where they kept kind of a medium to slightly poor hand just because it's a 7 with Leyline against our deck, which is not necessarily incorrect, by the way, our Liliana might be able to take it home. Okay, Dark Confidant, I definitely am pretty happy to see him. But we'll just play an Overgrown Tomb and pass. The opponent has Gemstone Mine into Pentad Prism, so here comes the mana development, and it's worth noting that Pentad Prism on turn 2 is the way that Ad Nauseam can, in theory, kill you turn 3. They play an untapped land, and they have a Simian Spirit Guide, and an Angel's Grace and Ad Nauseam in hand. Well, there's your turn 3 kill, so definitely worth noting. We draw another Tarmogoyf. Alright, so we're a bit threat-flooded now. Between the fact that we are threat-flooded, we desperately need to find interaction, and these Goyfs aren't very big for now anyway. I think we definitely want to play the Bob there. Hope he lives. Hope he can find us some action. So Phyrexian Unlife is the other alternative combo piece alongside Angel's Grace that pairs with Ad Nauseam. It's also a very good value piece that can buy them, you know, maybe a few more turns sometimes of life. However, big problems for them. Their mana development, they had to spend a Pentad Prism counter, and their Gemstone Mine is down to 1 counter as well. So, Dark Confidant reveals Fulminator Mage and Maelstrom Pulse. Those are two very, very fine flips. Liliana of the Veil is obviously a heck of a card, too, in this spot. So we have our cup is flowing over with riches, right? Little bit of a high-risk line in some ways to play the Lily here. Our safest line, in my opinion, is just to play the Fulminator and immediately Stone Rain the Seachrome Coast. However, if that's what they did last turn, I cannot imagine them having the ability to kill me this turn, right? So I think playing the Lily there, while it's technically higher risk than running the Fulminator out and immediately Stone Raining, I think it's fairly safe. And if it's safe, it is the better play here, right? We get to run them out of resources this way. There goes a Pact of Negation. Bob gets in for 2. And they didn't hit a land drop, so this just gets very good for us. Our line was rewarded. We flip a Scooz with Bob, and there's a Blooming Marsh, sure. So we'll start with the Lily tick up. Scooz is the worst card in our hand, so off it goes. And the opponent pitches a Simian Spirit Guide. Fine with me. Honestly, getting anything out of their hand at this stage is good. They kind of need it all at this point. They need mana, they need potentially combo pieces, they need answers, they need it all, so anything at all out of their hand is good. Bobby will connect for 2, and then it is Fulminator time. Now it's time to really punish their lack of mana. Hit them with hit the Seachrome Coast, and just play out that Blooming Marsh, so things are looking very good for us. And they still don't make a land drop. Pretty unfortunate for them, to be honest. Worth noting we're still behind on the life totals because we keep getting hit for 2 or 3 by the Bob while we're only clocking them for 2. But still fine. Trophy was a great hit off the Bob. Lily ticks up to pitch a Scoos, and we get an Unlife out of their hand. That's pretty nice. So Dark Confidant hits them for 2. And then what do? Well, they already know about this Maelstrom Pulse. They don't know about the trophy. We just revealed the ooze, not the trophy, with that play. So we'll go ahead and pulse the Unlife, and then we will fetch, get a basic, play a Tarmogoyf. Now we've got a very good clock. They're dead in 2 turns, and we can even ult them next turn by trophying away the Leyline. They find a land a little bit potentially too late for them. We're continuing to get hit hard by our Bob triggers. Fortunately, this is not a matchup where that tends to matter. So let's go ahead and begin by trophying away the Leyline. That resolves. Wonderful. Now we get to ult with the Lily. And here we want to split the things that are basically Lotus Petals. They're just 1 use any mana from each other. So either way, they've basically only got 1 real land and 1 Lotus Petal from here. And they keep the ones that can make more diverse colors overall, so that makes sense. And then our Liliana number 2 comes down. We'll tick up, we'll pitch this Field of Ruin. We've got a Goyf in hand in case they go, like, you know, Dark Slick Shores into Bantu's Last Reckoning. We can just rebuild the board, but they don't have that. They don't have anything that's going to save them from all of this value. So, Tarmogoyf helping to close the door there, but of course the stars of the show were Dark Confidant and Liliana of the Veil, with an honorable mention to that Fulminator Mage, you know, making sure we kept them off of the dangerous amounts of mana, and of course Pulse and Trophy showing up huge. These are matchups where those cards really, really shine, and as long as you see enough of them, you're probably going to be in a pretty good spot. However, it's definitely worth noting what the best targets are in what windows of the game. So I think we demonstrated that fairly well here, but regardless, very comprehensive victory here over Ad Nauseam, and feels good, man, feels good. This deck rising in the meta, it does make sense for the reasons I listed before. Also with KCI banned, this probably didn't have a very good KCI matchup if I had to guess. So yeah, makes sense that another combo deck like this that has a lot of consistency would rise to fill that void to some degree, but this is a deck that we can really rumble with, guys. We can really prey upon it, in my opinion. We've got everything. Liliana the Veil's a beating against them. The Rise of Ad Nauseam is just another reason I'm very happy to be on for Liliana of the Veil main deck these days. So anyway, we advance to 3-1 in the league. Let's go to round 5. Alright, my friends, 5th and final round of this competitive league. So far, so good for us at 3-1. We're on the play as well, which is nice, with a Confidant and a Liliana hand. Being on the play is so nice. The lands are a little bit awkward here, a little bit more painful and utility light than I would prefer. I would love to have like a turn 1 Hissing Quagmire here if I can't have a turn 1 discard spell. However, we can't have it all, so we'll just run out of fetch land, pass it. Opponent leads on a forest into Animation Module, so this is a value piece that is almost certainly part of a Hardened Scales affinity deck. So, sure, you got it. We will go ahead and fetch an Overgrown Tomb on the end step because our life total matters a lot. Kalitas, well, Kalitas is potentially part of a really nice 2-3-4 curve here if we can fade them having a really, really strong turn 2 and turn 3 of their own. But Kalitas is a very nice card in the matchup, there's no question about that. One of the many reasons it is nice to have a main deck Kalitas these days. They have an Arcbound Worker, and they make a Servo off of it, which does line up nicely against our Liliana of the Veil. But let's see what our draw step and our Bob yields. Inquisition of Kozilek off Bob, Thoughtseize off the draw. Alright, well, I think we definitely have to cast those spells now. At least this one. So, Inquisition is going to show us Darksteel Citadel, Inkmoth Nexus, Arcbound Ravager, which is a huge problem, Hardened Scales, which is a huge problem, although one we can answer with Decay, and Steel Overseer, which is also a huge problem. So they've got a handful of really good stuff. However, I think the plays here are to take away the things that can get value in response to removal or before we have a chance to cast it, which would be Ravager and Scales. That's going to leave them with just lands and the Overseer in hand, and of course the Overseer is a heck of a card, but if we need to, we can decay it before they get to untap with it. Just going to hold back our Bob here. Definitely don't want to trade him away. They rip a Stirrings off the top. Well, that's pretty good. And they find a Walking Ballista off of Stirrings. They play an Inkmoth Nexus. They just run out the 1/1 Ballista here. They don't get any value off the module, and they don't have anything else besides using it as a removal spell. And honestly, guys, that is fine with me. That's pretty fine with me. We've gotten our value off of Bob. We don't necessarily want to take too many more big hits off of the triggers anyway. So we're in a pretty commanding position if you ask me. But we still have to respect their ability to top deck. And we draw Inquisition. Well, okay. This is the only window in which I'm probably going to be able to use it. So sure, that lets me continue holding up this Abrupt Decay for future problematic permanents instead of having to use it on the Overseer. And Liliana of the Veil, whatever, she's not very good in this matchup. I just decided to be mana efficient, play her out, get rid of a thing. No, we're going to lose her on the crackback, but again, she's not very useful in most situations here against a deck like this. So, Arcbound Worker takes down Lily. And what did they draw for turn? Nothing, apparently, because they're going to invest mana into the animation module, pumping the worker, making a servo, passing to us with a card in hand. Fatal Push. Well, that's a pretty good draw, but it's going to be even better if we can untap with the Kalitas and then use it. So now is our window to tap out for the Trader of Get. And they have a Hardened Scales. Okay. That's a really good card. That's the namesake card of the deck. So what this is going to mean is that now they can pump all of this. They've got this mana sink, which is very good in its own right, going both tall and wide, you know, making something big and creating a bunch of chump blockers. And then Hardened Scales is just going to make that all of that even more effective. Treetop Village is our draw for turn. You know, that's honestly not that bad of a draw. We'll play it out. And here, I think we just kind of pass. We have to play a little bit reactively in this particular situation, and this is why. So now they're certainly going to try to use their mana. They're going to tap out for the Arcbound Worker. And now is when we get to decay the Hardened Scales, and they don't get the extra value there. And here, you know, we could have pushed as well, but I think this board is nothing I can't handle. So I would rather be disciplined with my push for at least one more turn. This is going to either this is going to incentivize them to play out whatever their next big bomb is, which we might need to push, or it might incentivize them to sink more mana into the worker to try to outsize the Kalitas. So sure enough, they just drew a land for a turn, so they're going to sink mana into the worker. We will push in response. Now, modular means when it dies, you may put its counters on target artifact creature. Kalitas has a replacement effect if a non-token creature an opponent controls would die. Instead, exile and create a zombie, right? So we get to blow out the modular trigger here with a replacement effect. They get a little value in response. They get to gain a life. Sure, you got it. But Kalitas is stopping their value train in its tracks and is now a big, big problem for them. We've got tokens to gum up the ground now just like they do, and Kalitas himself is pretty big. Tarmogoyf, that's a good draw. So let's attack with Kalitas and the zombie before we do anything. I'm so happy to trade the zombie for 2 servos if they want to try that, but they just chump the Kalitas. Also fine with that. And then it is Tarmogoyf time. So I did not attack with the Treetop Village because I want to respect the prospect of these triple Inkmoth Nexi. The Inkmoths are their most realistic way to victory now. So I think holding up Field of Ruin there is better than coming across with the Treetop Village. So they just play a land for a turn, so we are fading some draw steps here. Very nice for us that they didn't draw any kind of a crazy bomb there. they're just going to send in all 3 Ink Moths, and we'll kill one with Field of Ruin, we'll take 2 poison counters, and we make a zombie. Alright. Another Treetop Village is not the most exciting draw I've ever had. It also is a little awkward because it doesn't let us, you know, activate the Kalitas here if we wanted to do that, but honestly, the lifelink is not that relevant anymore, so we're just pretty happy to turn everything sideways here. We're just racing. They obviously block the 7/8 Tarmogoyf. Feels cool to see the Goyf at 7/8. And we play out our other manland. We've got so much power coming across next turn, and they just scoop it up. So we faded a couple important draw steps here. They didn't find much in some crucial turns, but we navigated into a position where that was the case. Definitely got a little bit of mileage out of our Dark Confidant, kind of let us stay in the game until we were able to tap out for the Kalitas, and then Kalitas took over the game with a little help closing it out from the Apes and the Goyf. So, yeah, a little bit of everything came into play here. Field of Ruin was potentially nice. Abrupt Decay was real nice. Fatal Pushes, discard. We had a little bit of everything. So, feels great to take Game 1 against Hardened Scales. This is a much tougher matchup for us than traditional Affinity, but I think our sideboarding protocol is going to be pretty similar. So let's go ahead and check that out. Alright, my friends, on the draw, we're going to be on the draw, which may or may not change what we're doing, but regardless, let's figure out how to sideboard against Hardened Scales Affinity. So, you guessed it yet again, our all-star utility card, Maelstrom Pulse, it comes in. Collective Brutality is mostly just a kill spell, but that's totally fine. Taking away Ancient Stirring sometimes will happen too, but yeah, that's pretty rare. It's mostly just a kill spell. Lily the Last Hope, Languish, all the cards you're familiar with that are good against small creature decks, and Engineered Explosives, of course, showing up big here. Other cards to consider, well, none of this stuff here in the left column is very appealing. We'll put Nissa over there as well. I guess Kitchen Finks is marginally useful if you've got nothing better to do, because they do try to kind of hammer damage through on the ground a lot more than traditional Affinity. You would never really want Finks against Trad Affinity, but against Hardened Scales, Finks does get a little bit better. Good enough to bring in? I still don't really know. Fulminator Mage is also very reasonable. Just hitting their manlands is great. Manlands are a big part of how they win a lot of games, and they are also a land-light deck in general. So Fulminator is pretty solid. These 5 are kind of our best 5, though. And we'll put those in, and then we'll see. So Liliana the Veil is pretty poor, to the point where I'm pretty happy to cut 3, and maybe even consider cutting the 4th. I don't quite know, but that's definitely not the worst place to start. Nile Spellbomb can just straight up come out, doesn't do anything. Thoughtseize is too painful, and they empty their hand too quickly, so we'll leave in Inquisitions, we'll take out Thoughtseizes. And if we cut these 7, then we are bringing in at least 2 Fulminator Mages, possibly 3. And is there anything else we don't like so much? Well, I don't know. The rest of the cards look pretty good to me. I guess if you wanted to leave a Liliana in, you could cut a slower threat like Tracker or a somewhat underwhelming threat like Skooz. If you thought you could leverage one Liliana of the Veil pretty well, then which may be the case, then I would probably look to cut one of those 2 cards, or maybe just leave out a Fulminator Mage. But Fulminator might be better than Tracker number 3 or Skooz number 3, right? So I think one of these 3 cards should be making way. Otherwise, your 61 should be looking like that. And I believe, let's see, I was on the draw here. I believe I just cut a Skooz here. Actually, no, I was on the draw. I believe I cut the 4th Veil on the draw, and then we brought one back in and cut the Skooz. But again, any of those, that last card could be a few different things that stays in or comes out. But regardless, we're looking like that for this game here, and let's see how it went. Alright, my friends, game 2 on the draw against Hardened Scales, and I don't really know what to think about this hand, because it's mostly filled with the cards that were borderline, like we want to trim one of them, Trackers and Skoozes. They're not the most impressive in this in this hand. However, Fatal Push is one of our absolutely best cards here, especially on the draw. It's very, very important to have access to Fatal Push and or a discard, and we have the push here. And the hand functions, right? The hand functions. Field of Ruin is kind of a second kill spell in a way, so I think this hand is on the poor side of keepable, but it is keepable. And, you know, it's an interesting question. The opponent mulliganed to 6, so that made me think I've got more time here. I'm gonna keep it, and I don't want to risk mulling down to an unplayable 6. I think this hand will serve. So, opponent keeps 6 here. They lead on the Opal, the Nexus, and they'll pass. Okay. Maelstrom Pulse is a fine draw. Our hand continues to be slow, but we've got access to another piece of removal, so that's what I wanted to see. Animation Module. The opponent will then tap Inkmoth Nexus to animate itself, presumably to turn on the Opal. That gives them Metalcraft, and they can cast a Stirring. So sure, you got it. Stirrings reveals a land, Llanowar Reborn. This is a land with Graft 1, which is, don't get me wrong, very good in the deck. But the fact that they... this was an interesting spot. If they had showed me a creature there, I might have hung on to this Fatal Push. But because they showed me a land, I'm like, alright, I can go ahead and be very mana efficient here, set them back on mana themselves, take care of a threat, and then next turn I get to be proactive and play out a Scooz. Blooming Marsh is a pretty fine draw considering the trackers and the life total and all that stuff, so pretty happy with that. They play Animation Module, and then they play Llanowar Reborn, and they make a servo, but they decline to move the counter to it. So they're down to 2 cards in hand. And I untap and draw 1 to have 6. So that's pretty awesome. And I think I'm far enough ahead that I want to really press my advantage. So the first step to that is attack, see if for some odd reason they want to take the chump block here, but they don't. Fair enough. And I think we just take our really clean 2-for-1 while we have it, right? I think this is correct. We're just going to pulse away double Animation Module. We know how good that card can be in grindy matches like ours. So I think that was the correct play. Let's see how it works out for us. They have a Steel Overseer. And once again, they hold onto that Graft trigger, and they just hit us back for 1. And then they pass. So we draw Dark Confidant. Alright, Dark Confidant is fine, but really wanted removal for that Overseer. Look how... Alright, my friends, technical difficulties. I accidentally skipped very far ahead. So, like I was saying, Dark Confidant is a fine draw, but we really, really wanted removal for the Steel Overseer. We are just loaded down with threats. However, at least they're pretty decent ones, all things considered. You could argue maybe for Confidant, like, field Llanowar Reborn and then play the Confidant. I think, that's a line, but I think Tracker into land is the higher percentage line for sure here. The main attraction to Dark Confidant is that it lets us continue seeing more cards off the top without having to invest mana into him, but he's weaker to a top-decked Walking Ballista, and it's just not as mana efficient, again, unless you wanted to field Llanowar Reborn there. So I think Tracker is the correct line, Tracker into land. And sure enough, there's the Walking Ballista, and now they're going to use that Graft ability. Very, very nice in conjunction with making an Arcbound worker, and then they get to Anthem the team permanently with a Steel Overseer. Feels bad, man. They get a free attack here. We're certainly not taking the trade, but yep, the Walking Ballista just shoots our Tracker. Okay. Let's untap, and we draw another Scooz. Ooh, we are so flooded with threats, so low on interaction. We just need to crack a clue here, looking for a kill spell, and it's a Field of Ruin. This is pretty bad. So here I thought about doing a couple different things. I thought about running out of Scooz. In the end, and of course I thought about playing Fulminator Mage too. In the end, I decided to run out a Bob. and I'll explain why. So on the face of it, this looks very bad, because even if they have nothing else going on, they untap, they Anthem the team with the Overseer, they ping down the Bob, they still keep their Walking Ballista. That is definitely bad. However, I don't necessarily know if it's going to be clear to everybody just how far behind we are. Like, it doesn't seem like we're that far behind, but we are so far behind, it's really hard to explain just how far behind we are. Letting them untap twice with a Steel Overseer, which happens no matter what we do here, has let, in conjunction specifically with Walking Ballista, but also with their ability to generate a wide board. Yeah, very, very bad. Now, therefore, the reason I played the Dark Confidant is because that play for them might be too much value to pass up. Like, even if they draw something else to do, like an Arcbound Ravager that might be really good, maybe they just say, okay, we sandbag that for a turn, we Anthem the team, we ping the Bob, we attack, we pass. That lets me just top deck Languish to get back in this game, because again, my assessment of this situation right now is that we are so far behind, it's insane. Even though it might not quite look like it, we are very, very far behind. Also, playing a 2-drop lets us start investing mana into Skoos, which of course was the reason we could have played the other Skoos as well, but you know. I explained my line here, and they have an animation module which pretty much punishes us to the max, because animation module fits along really well with the Anthem the team and ping the Bob plan anyway, so pretty much max punished, but I don't think, unless we draw our outs, our good interaction, our Languish, I don't think what we did there particularly mattered. So, we lose our Bob, we eat something with the Skoos, and we draw Kalitas. So this is the best threat that we have in the hand, but it is still yet another threat. We just cannot find interaction to save our lives. We had some of it to begin with, but this Overseer is just rampaging, just totally out of control. And but we do have to play the Kalitas there. It's just the best play we have. And they get to go really, really wide, but the Kalitas is at least still kind of walling off some of their plays, are forcing them to spend resources in some ways that they might not otherwise have to. But either way, we are in big trouble. And these are two good attacks here, because if we let them through, then we're dead. They kill us with Walking Ballista pings. So we have to take a block, and neither block is good for me. It's obviously going to be Skoos we throw away instead of Kalitas. If we block the Arcbound Worker, they get to put all these they get to put all these counters onto something else. Actually they don't. They don't. So I probably should have blocked the Arcbound Worker here, but I was thinking they're going to get the modular trigger, but of course, as we saw in Game 1, Kalitas replacement effect stops that. So I missed a trick here. I could have gotten a zombie by blocking the Worker, right? But look at the board, right? We're just dead unless we top deck a Languish. And to be fair, if we top deck a Languish, we win, pretty much. So let's draw, and it's another threat. You have got to be kidding me. We have seen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 creatures over 7 turns in a matchup where we certainly have way more pieces of interaction in the deck than we have threats. But you know, that's kind of how it goes sometimes. We just get threat flooded here, and the best we can do is just play a Goyf and pass bluffing interaction. But if we had interaction, we'd just try to use it main phase before they get to untap with the Overseer. So Steel Overseer is arguably one of the more underwhelming cards in the deck, because we have so many things that kill him. Like, he dies to a Stiff Breeze, he dies to every form of interaction in our deck. And they, of course, have to untap with him, whereas a lot of their other really good plays, they can either respond to removal with actions like with Arcbound Ravager, or they just get value out of removal like with Hangerback Walker. Steel Overseer is usually the least of our problems. You know, Walking Ballista fits in that latter category too. They can take off the counters in response to removal. Steel Overseer is usually the least of our problems, but we just couldn't find a kill spell. So we lose to the Overseer going absolutely ham alongside Ballistas. And animation module making servo tokens as well. So that was just severely unlucky in my opinion to draw all of these creatures. Definitely feels bad, but what can we do? That'll happen sometime, so let's move on to Game 3. Everybody, here it is, Game 3, playing for the 4-1. We're on the play, which is really where we want to be against this Hardened Scales deck, and the hand is a little light on action. Scooz is a underwhelming turn 2 play compared to Bob or Goyf, but you know what? This hand is awesome anyway because it has turn 1 Inquisition to clear the way for turn 3 Liliana the Last Hope, who on the play is sometimes very nearly unstoppable. So the opponent will keep 7. Let's inquire as to the contents of your hand. We see they have kind of a land-heavy setup too, and we see Ancient Stirrings, Dismember, and Steel Overseer. Well, I think Stirrings is the clear take here, because Stirrings is the thing that's going to find them something that can mess with our Liliana taking over the game. If they have to tap out turn 2 for the Overseer, we get to tap out turn 3 for Lily. That's going to be very hard for them to come back from, so that is our plan. The opponent plays a Forest, and they play a Pithing Needle that they ripped off the top, and they blind name Liliana the Last Hope. Well done, opponent. That's a really good blind name. It's definitely the right one in general, and it definitely gets us max punished here. So, that just gets pretty bad, and now, even though we know this could be walking into a Dismember, there's no real reason not to play a threat here, because we drew the Goyf. Maybe we bait them into Dismembering the Ooze, and then the Goyf can kind of start doing some work for us, right? That's the plan anyway. But either way, we don't necessarily need 3 open mana on turn 3 anymore, because they just blanked our Lily. Feels bad. They tap out for that Overseer. Alright. And we draw Fulminator Mage. Okay, I mean, not very good. We still just want to draw interaction instead of threats, and Fulminator is kind of both. But here in this spot, we really wanted something. You know, a kill spell for the Overseer, a Decay or a Trophy for the Pithing Needle, anything but a Fulminator Mage or, you know, something similar to that. So Walking Ballista is going to get us pretty good here. They get to put the Llanowar Reborn counter on it, then Anthem it with the Overseer, then just ping our Ooze off the field while sticking around. So, yeah, it's a really good top deck for them. Really good couple top decks. Pithing Needle was amazing. Walking Ballista, very good. What do we have off the top? We have a Marsh Flat, so we are not so fortunate. And again, we're just desperate for interaction. Like, this Overseer Ballista combo is like everything in our deck answers these cards. All of our interaction, basically, but we can't find it. So it is just Manland into Fulminator Mage after clocking a bit with the Goyf. Horizon Canopy. They're digging. They find a Welding Jar. So Welding Jar, that's a brutal find as well. It means even though our interaction would be pretty late to the party, still better late than never, but Welding Jar is just another layer of protection to fight through. And knowing that Welding Jar can protect an animated Inkmoth Nexus, I said, well, I guess now's a fine time to Fulminator. I think that was the correct decision, but the Nexus is not necessarily their only route to victory with just the value of Overseer and Ballista. And then they have a Hardened Scales. They dismember our Goyf, they play the Hardened Scales. Their draws couldn't get much better, so they animate the Overseer, they hit us with a 3/3 Ballista, and now what do we do? Well, we still want to just draw Languish. Languish is still our best draw, and we draw Tireless Tracker. You know, that's not the worst draw in the world. In theory, it can generate enough velocity where we find enough cards to outgrind all of this value on the other side of the field. So in response to our Marsh Flats has entered the battlefield. In response to that Tireless Tracker trigger, our opponent pings us for 1. So we want to just say, okay, you've pinged us, and then they ping us for again. So this was actually a bit of a punt from our opponent here, because now what we get to do is fetch in response here. And if they let this resolve, we will make a clue. So they actually have to cash in their Walking Ballista using all 3 counters on it to kill a 3/2. So that was our window. We know they still have a Darksteel Citadel in hand, so they're totally in top deck mode. And we actually have some advantages here if we can just like either find any of our million kill spells for the Steel Overseer, or maybe get the Pithing Needle off the field and take it from there, but we probably have to deal with the Overseer first now. Regardless, they play out the Darksteel Citadel. They just tap to main phase buff their Overseer, which means they probably have another land in hand, and they pass. Alright, now is our chance to find some really good stuff with the clue. We find Inquisition, and we draw Inquisition for turn. You've got to be kidding me, deck. You gotta be kidding me. There's no reason not to fire off one of these here, even though, yep, as we expected, just a land. So we are pretty well, you know, just on the bad side of variance here in this game, but we are ahead on the clock, on the damage front, so sure, we'll hit you for 3 with the Treetop Village. Fatal Push, where art thou? Granted, they have Welding Jar, but even Fatal Push, forcing them to tap and regen would be okay. It would be a start, but then they rip a Walking Ballista off the top, so I mean, the Hardened Scales value just goes through the roof with 4 mana. They make a 5/5 Walking Ballista, so pretty sure we just lost to that top deck there for sure. And we draw Dark Confidant. Well, we are just dead. We are just dead, and they are going to find another bomb off the top. It's a Hangerback Walker. All the Hardened Scales and Steel Overseer value multiplying there too as well. We just scoop it up. And, you know, I don't want to beat the drum of negativity. I don't want to manifest a negativity bias, but how unlucky was this that they ripped the Pithing Needle immediately off the top, blind named our Lily. Good play, by the way. And then they had all of this gas, they had all this good stuff, and then even though they kind of slipped up and allowed us to sequence in such a way that their tracker, that our tracker basically traded with their Walking Ballista and netted us 2 clues, which is more than we could ever have hoped for, we still just whiffed. We Inquisition, Dark Confidant, and they rip a Walking Ballista off the top after having found Hardened Scales. Just not much we could do here. That Pithing Needle lost us the game. If we had turn 3 Liliana take up, kill the Overseer, it's a totally different game, and one that we are very, very likely to win. Liliana that early onto ticking up to clear the board, yeah, that's one that they're going to struggle to beat. So this one was very, very winnable. In my opinion, from what I can see, we did nothing wrong. We just got out top decked. So anyway, good games, well played to the opponent. We were so close to a really strong 4-1, but you know, our losses, man, were just hideous luck this game. Never, you know, getting land screwed both games against blue-white control, and then here in, you know, game 2 felt, games 2 and 3 were both very unlucky here against Hardened Scales. We got flooded on threats game 2. All the threats, very little interaction. Here in game 3, they just blew us out with the Pithing Needle, and they just built up some really nice synergies while we drew blanks. However, these are some powerful decks. Blue-white control and Hardened Scales, we take nothing away from them. They're both pretty tough matchups, and they both really punished our stumbles here. So, all in all, still a really fun league, still a really successful league, going 3-2, cashing the league. Getting some really solid wins in there as well. A really grindy, interactive, fun, and ultimately successful match against Grixis Shadow. We beat the Merfolk down pretty well, although they did tempo us out in game 2. We kind of closed the jaws of removal upon them in games 1 and 3, with a little help from them mulling to 6 every game. That was definitely nice. And then we kind of crushed Ad Nauseam. We kind of showed Ad Naz the business. So definitely was a pretty good league overall, with, I think, probably worse luck than average. Again, who's counting? We don't want to dwell on that, but we keep getting 3-2s with some fairly bad luck, and I think that's a really good place to be, because if we can consistently 3-2 even when variance is not on our side, then we get some really nice luck like we did in our 5-0. We had some free wins in our 5-0. That was my previous video. There's no question about that. So that's not to say that I have been continuing to maintain my unbeaten positive record in the tournament practice, the competitive leagues. I did have a 2-3 that I didn't upload before my 5-0. And in between the 5-0 and this league, I had kind of a pseudo 1-4. I'll explain. It was very frustrating. We 2-0'd Ad Nauseam to start it out, and then we were 1-0 and about to win Game 2 against Storm. And there was actually a storm going on outside my house. There was quite the windstorm, and I lost power for pretty much exactly the amount of time needed to time out. I was legitimately like a turn or two away from winning Game 2, it looked like to me. So that was very frustrating. It took me from 2-0 in the league, what should have been a 2-0, to a 1-1. And then I lost the other 3 games running. I got turn 1 Blood Moon by Mono Red Prison. I got land screwed against Wilderness Wreck. It was a mess. So I didn't upload that one for obvious reasons, and it really should have been at least a 2-3, and of course I would have played different matchups if I had won that game too. But regardless, we have dipped below 500 in a couple leagues. We're not only positive anymore. However, the overall win rate is still very, very firmly positive. We got a lot of 3-2s with a smattering of 4-1s and 5-0, so I am still very, very pleased with this deck. And I thank you all so much for tuning in and for supporting this content. Please, my friends, as always, let me know what you thought about the lines I took here, what you thought about the sideboarding decisions, and what you think about the matchups in general. Once again, we are thanking all of our patrons, including the brand new Inquisitor, Benjamin McElhaney. Welcome aboard again, and thanks to everybody. Stay tuned to the channel because I will be updating my deck for March, as I always do, and I'm going away this weekend, so it might be another week or maybe a little bit more before I get another league played for you. But as you know, my friends, I'm going to do that as quickly and with as much consistency as my life allows. So thanks again for watching. Looking forward to hearing your feedback, and I will talk to you soon. Hope you all have a great night.